So welcome to the session, everyone. Introduction to NodeXL, using NodeXL for kind of analyzing social media data sets. I'm just going to talk for around 15 minutes just to kind of set the scene about the workshop, what NodeXL is, how I've been using it in my research. Then I'll pass over to Dr. Smith, who will speak in a bit more detail about using NodeXL, kind of importing data and using it for social network analysis. So in my session, I'll also talk about how you can get access to a trial NodeXL license as well. And then Mark, as I mentioned, you speak in a little bit more detail about the application. So in terms of myself, I've got a PhD in information science. I analyzed a set of data related to infectious disease outbreaks. And I was reviewing and talking about different social media tools for the LSE Impact blog. And one of the tools I came across was NodeXL. And I connected with Dr. Smith and the Social Media Research Foundation to kind of review and use the tool over a number of years. So that's how I got interested in NodeXL. Dr. Smith, who will be kind of leading the second part of the session, is a sociologist who's got an interest in online communities and computer-mediated interaction. Mark is also the director of the Social Media Research Foundation and leads the Connected Action Consulting Group. And he's often running events and training on how you can use NodeXL to get data from social media, write academic research papers, and do all sorts of analysis using the application. Shortly after my talk, I'll share a link with you in the chat where you can sign up to receive a trial license that Mark can send out. So you can actually play around with the application in your own time as well, import some data and see how you might be able to use it in your research as well. And feel free to tweet about the session as well. You can find us #NodeXL, where we often tweet different network insights. The Social Media Research Foundation is a collection of different academics that have been kind of helping and maintaining the NodeXL application. And myself and Mark are also a part of this foundation as well. And Mark will be speaking to you a little bit more about the foundation and some of the work that we've been doing. Essentially, my kind of interest in NodeXL came from my interest generally in researching social media and trying to find out tools that could help me analyze how different users connected with each other. And there's a lot of different platforms out there, like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. One of the nice things I liked about NodeXL is this ability to bring in data from other platforms and other networks. If we've got that data, we can actually bring it in and analyze the relationships between different users. And then kind of Mark will speak about that in more detail. So NodeXL is an acronym: Network Overview, Discovery, and Exploration for XL. This is what the NodeXL ribbon looks like once you've got it kind of installed and ready to use. And it essentially allows us to collect data and visualize it in Microsoft Excel. And in our research, we've kind of reviewed literature using NodeXL, and we found that it's been used in a wide variety of previous research. So people have used it for kind of analyzing blogs, social media, but also people have managed to bring in data from other platforms and kind of analyze it for insight. So this is a neat kind of summary of the things you can do using this application. So you've got the network analysis, network metrics, cluster analysis, vertex metrics. But you can also do rich content analysis on that data as well. So text analysis, sentiment analysis, top contents analysis, time series analysis, and then you've got these visualizations as well. So I was scanning some of the papers published in the conference this year, and I saw some of those are using NodeXL, and you might see some of these visuals in those papers as well. So people have managed to do semantic network analysis and social network analysis as well. One of the striking features of the application is that it's fully automated as well. So we can just click, get this data and kind of analyze it. And we've got this automated text analysis, sentiment analysis, and time series analysis as well. And we can also use it to identify key users, hubs, and information sources using different centrality metrics. So we've got degree centrality, betweenness centrality that you might have already come across. We can process those and many more in NodeXL as well. So we can use it to pinpoint influential users, key groups that form around topics, and also popular information sources as well. So in a review of literature published in 2019, the literature review found that NodeXL had been used in many thousands of academic work, and it'd been used for all sorts of analysis, not just social media. So it'd been used to analyze personal email networks, medical data records, news stories, and kind of specific campus-based social media platforms as well. If you are interested in learning more, there are a number of books out there as well. The book on the left-hand side, Analyzing Social Media Networks with NodeXL Insights from a Connected World, in its second edition, I would highly recommend that book if you're starting out with NodeXL. It assumes no prior knowledge and step-by-step kind of walks you through to the more advanced features of NodeXL. There's other general social network analysis books out there as well that might be of interest as well to kind of supplement the information here. There's also some other recommended reading by the Pew Research Internet Project titled Mapping Twitter Topic Networks from Polarized Crowds to Community Clusters as well. That will be worth checking out after this session as well. If anyone uses Gephi, there is material on YouTube as well on how we can actually take our NodeXL network data and put it into other applications as well. So there is support with other tools where we can actually take out data from tools like NodeXL and put those into the likes of Gephi and other software as well. In my own research, I've been using NodeXL to analyze misinformation and disinformation on social media, on Twitter and the likes. So in one paper we published a couple of years now, we were looking at the conspiracy that 5G was responsible for spreading COVID-19 and kind of affecting people. So we used NodeXL to analyze that network, find out how that information was spreading. So this visual was created in NodeXL, and we were able to find out key hubs, key users, and information sources responsible for spreading kind of malicious information. And we came out with some recommendations for public health authorities on how they can kind of clamp down on some of the disinformation that was being spread. We've also used NodeXL for popular culture topics as well. So last year, the Squid Game TV show became really popular on social media, and we were able to use NodeXL to create a network, a graph and chart to find out key hubs of information, key people helping Netflix kind of spread this TV show across Twitter and kind of pinpoint influential users as well. We've also taken data out of NodeXL, put it in other tools, and run a correlation analysis with kind of medical data as well. So there's all sorts of different things you can do as well. So we've been using NodeXL to analyze a wide variety of topics: public health, popular culture, sport, and so forth. So there's a lot of kind of scope with this particular application. Just before I kind of hand over to Mark, if you are interested in learning more after the workshop today, there is a summer school taking place 1st of August, which is a 5-day intense event where we'll be kind of showing you more about NodeXL, talking more in depth about some of the previous research that's been done. There's also a chance to publish your research as well. We've got some editors from open access journals where you'd be able to potentially submit your work as well. So we'll be able to pick some of the top papers and kind of get those published. So if anyone's interested, likes NodeXL, wants to learn more, I'd recommend having a search for the NodeXL Social Media Research Summer School and coming along if you can. So that's all from me. I'll pass over to you, Mark, for the tutorial and kind of overview of the application.
Thank you, Wasim. Let me share my screen now. Very good. All right. Hello all, I'm Mark Smith. I am a sociologist. I'm from the Social Media Research Foundation. I have the opportunity to work with scholars like Wasim and others who are interested in the landscape of social media and in the scholarly study of it. Let's see if I can bring up a few web pages that I think may help tell our story. So first off, maybe you can join me here at the NodeXL Graph Gallery.org, NodeXLGraphGallery.org. And this is a good place to start hearing about the NodeXL story. We are an application intended to support scholarship into collections of connections. That's one possible definition for social media. It could be email, it could be Twitter, Wiki, YouTube, Flickr, potentially data sources of all sorts in which people send something to somebody else. Here at the NodeXL Graph Gallery, what you'll see are a collection of little thumbnails. These are all network data sets that have been collected by users of NodeXL. You can think of this as a kind of Instagram for graphs. We were going to call it Instagraph, but we got very frightened and decided we wouldn't take the chance. You could use this to answer questions like, what does a hashtag look like? So for example, this is the hashtag for SM Society. And if we move this over here, we could look at it in its natural form. Here it is, SM Society. It's a hashtag, it's our conference hashtag. And here we can see a list of messages, and scrolling back, we can see that some of them are an hour ago and another about a little bit more than an hour ago. And as we scroll back, we see a collection of messages. And this is wonderful, and there've been some really great messages, but one of the challenges we might have is, as a scholar, saying something systematic about those collections of messages. And so what NodeXL does is make it possible to take a kind of structured picture of a collection of connections. And this, I think you'll find it if you browse over to NodeXL Graph Gallery. This, the most recent network map uploaded, is the map of SM Society. And it is the map of 105 Twitter users who tweeted over the last 8 days, 1 hour and 38 minutes, the word SM Society. And that might be you. You might be on this map. If you've tweeted a few times, you're almost certainly on this map. So this is the picture of the connections among those 100-some people. How do they connect? Well, they connect whenever they say one another's names. If I reply to you, retweet you, mention you, quote you, and as you can see, some people have, well, mostly just retweeted the SM Society user account. That makes sense. That's the, in some ways, most important account at the conference. And this structure here has created a kind of audience. These are the people who retweeted the SM Society account, but have not talked to each other. So this is the audience around one account. But in this group, we can see this dense cluster of lots of accounts that not only retweet or respond to the SM Society account, they also densely interact with one another. And these are the members of essentially the community at the center of SM Society. And there are some other smaller clusters. These are the maybe smaller break-off areas of discussion. Perhaps they are focused on special topics within our conference's areas of interest. We can know more about that by looking at these little titles, group 1, group 2, group 3, these words at the top of each of these boxes. These are the words or hashtags used by the people in that cluster more than any others. And so what we're trying to create in this image is a visual summary, an overview, a kind of crowd aerial photograph of the participants who have come together and tweeted of their own choice and their own volition the word SM Society. And some of us retweeted others. Some of us were retweeted by others. And we can do not only the data collection and some visualization, but we can also do some math. We can calculate things that tell us that these people are the people that network theory would tell us are the most important people in our community. At least in this time period, within this data collection, this group of people are the people most in the center of things. And then below it, these are the words that, or the hashtags in this case, that most frequently co-occur with our hashtag SM Society. And so our goal in doing this work is to provide scholars with digital artifacts that become the framework for scholarship. Because in many cases, while it may be possible with our conference to read all of the messages, in many cases, topics of interest rapidly exceed the capacity of a human scholar to consume them. And so just as a thought experiment, imagine you can read 10 tweets in a minute. That seems like a lot of tweets, maybe give or take 10 tweets a minute. How many tweets can you read in an hour? 600. How many tweets can you read in a day? Well, it depends on how long you can sit. I appreciate that, but let me give you 3 or 4 hours. So 2,000, 3,000 tweets per day is about what you can consume. But what we're going to see is that it is relatively easy for a topic of scholarly interest to generate 3 or 4 or 5,000 tweets per hour, or certainly per day. In other words, we as human scholars need augmentation in order to be able to grasp the phenomena. The same way that microbiologists need a microscope, and apparently all those astronomers out there need a $10 billion space telescope. We computational social scientists also need instruments for the collection, structure, analysis, visualization, and reporting on social media. So those are 5 basic tasks that we think the NodeXL tool performs. It collects data, stores it, analyzes it, visualizes it, writes a report about it. And that's what you see here, this report, the summary of the content and statistics related to, at the moment, SM Society. So these are 5 very important tasks that allow us to gain some insight into the SM Society phenomena, the fact that we are together and we're tweeting about this. But there are so many other social phenomena out there in social media. Many of these phenomena are consequential. They have political implications. They have social implications. We can see that there are other scholarly communities. For example, if you like SM Society, you may also like Sunbelt. Sunbelt 2022 is taking place, I believe, in Sydney, Australia. Similar kind of conference, lots of interest in networks. Again, this is the network of the network people. And it allows us to quickly gain some insights into who are the key people, what are the clusters or groups, and what are the different collections of content that people are talking about. So you could say that we are interested in answering the question, what does a hashtag look like? Can we come up with a visualization, and not just a visualization, but an analytic visualization, something you can use to compare 2 different hashtags, a visualization that allows us to actually tell stories about changes in social media. And so many visions of social media may kind of resemble this. There's a kind of flocking behavior. There does not seem to be a formal structure. But when we have used our tools to actually study social media, we find that this is an attractive metaphor. These are This is a murmuration of starlings, but this actually is a mistake from a sociological point of view. Humans don't do this in more than one ways. One, we don't have wings, right? Humans don't fly, we don't flock. But there's another important way, and that is all of these birds are equal, and humans never are. And so if these birds were humans, they would more likely be chickens than starlings, because chickens have a pecking order. And that's a very important story for us when we look at social media data. What we see is a great deal of inequality rather than a kind of normal distribution. So it's interesting to think of this as a visual metaphor, but it's not quite gonna work because all of the birds are equal in this. And what we're gonna see is in social media, almost none of the people are equal. So I'm a sociologist, and sociologists are really the two or more people. We're interested in these collective forms of activity, and increasingly these collective forms of activity take place online, if only because of COVID, but for a lot of reasons, people gather online more easily than they gather in physical spaces. And that's a problem, because when they gather in physical spaces, there's information in the crowd, the shape of the crowd. Are they moving? Is it two crowds in conflict? Are they frightened and are they scattering? Are they bored? You get a lot of the feel for a crowd just by sort of picking up its vibrations. That's because we're social animals. But when we look at online behavior, what we get is a list of messages. And no matter how diligent you are, you probably can't read them all. And if any of you have written papers and submitted them to journals, and your method was, I read a lot of tweets or messages of any sort, you may have had some challenges with reviewer number 2, who asks for more rigorous, quantifiable methods. And so we want to provide that. We want to make it possible to visualize the crowd in a durable artifact that actually has scientific utility. And so in very short order, we can draw a picture. We can draw a picture of a political crowd. These are people in the US talking about politics a few years ago. I know that many of us may not be Americans, so I'll just give you the little background on American politics. We have 2 political parties in the United States, a right-wing party and a far right-wing party. And that's what you're seeing here. The red group is the far right-wing party, the blue group is the right-wing party, and they're clustered separately, and they're talking about different things. And thus, in a single image, we can gain some insight into the shape of the crowd, the activity of the crowd, its topicality, its leaders. And this is in lieu of just trying to read several thousand messages and intuit that now we have a kind of connectoscope, a way of looking at connected structures. And so we observe that almost everything on the internet is making a network. Everything is making a connection between some user and some other user. Perhaps you saw a photograph and you liked it. You saw a tweet and you retweeted it. You saw a user and you followed them. You wrote a message and it used a hashtag, and then somebody else used that hashtag. All of these things form connections that essentially form networks. And if we take messages and extract network information from those messages, we often can gain and add value to the data we've collected. Instead of a collection of messages and the words they contain, we now have a collection of connected entities. And from these connections, we can really learn a lot. We can gain all sorts of insights. So what we are about over in the Social Media Research Foundation is building tools that make it much easier to get at these footprints in the sand kinds of opportunities. The public data, just a caveat, no efforts are made here in any way to get at private data. So when people go to the internet and publicly encode their connections to their celebrities that they like, or to the professional leadership that they like, or to the other scholars in their community that they find interesting. They're leaving data behind. They're leaving public data behind. And it's a kind of an open source intelligence opportunity for social sciences to find a way to systematically collect these footprints from public repositories and add value, to process it and increase the utility of that value. I like to say, if you just add a kilowatt to the data set, you can really do a lot with it. And so what we want to do is run it through a computer that can actually calculate new insights from a collection of connections. And so one of the insights that we get when we've done this just, I guess, I think we're over 3 or 4 million of these networks have been analyzed. We gain a certain generic set of observations. And one is that in all things network and in all things social media, there is nothing normal about the normal curve. The normal curve does describe a lot of important phenomena on Earth. I think human height gets described this way pretty well. There are no 1,000-foot tall people. There are no 3-inch tall people. But this curve does not describe a lot of things. As a matter of fact, there's an enormous number of things that do not follow this shape. I'll give you an example. Human wealth. How much money do how many people have? So this would suggest that there are almost no rich people and almost no poor people, and that everybody is kind of okay. And let me just check a second. Nope, not the world I'm living in. So the world I live in looks more like this. This is the power law distribution. That's the world in which those who have the power make the laws. This describes wealth. It also describes a lot of things in social media, as in how many influencers are there. They're all the way over here at the end. There's not many. Less than 1% of the population are influencers. So if this is social media influence on this dimension, and this is how many people have it, most people have almost none, and a very small number have a lot. And that's sort of a pattern in social media, in wealth, in celebrity, in political power, in popularity on Spotify. There's an awful lot of this curve in our world. And for some reason, this one gets called normal, and yet this one does not. So I think for sociologists, we should probably all get like these tattoos, or this should be like our symbol, power law distribution. In network theory, this gets expressed in the form of something called the Matthew effect, or preferential attachment. Those who have much, to those who have much, more will be given. There's a Wikipedia page for something called the 1990 rule, which also describes this steep fall off in whatever the attractive feature is. So with NodeXL, we're going to get to NodeXL in just a second. What we are all about is answering the question, who did what, with whom, when, and where. If you can put that information in a spreadsheet, we will draw you a picture. And when you write this in a spreadsheet, what we are encoding is, did A have a connection with B? Did B have a connection back to A? Do they have a mutual relationship? So in some cases, the relationships could be mutual, but they're imbalanced. So you do call mom every now and then, but she calls you every day. So there are arrows that go in both directions, but one is thicker. And then in some cases, these relationships are mutual. It's hard to live near someone who doesn't live near you. I used to say that it's hard to be married to somebody who's not married to you, but it turns out I was wrong. So what we want to see is a spreadsheet that represents these connections, row after row after row. And you may have manually encoded it. We have software that will extract that information out of places like Wikipedia or Twitter or YouTube or Flickr and a lot of others. And so this word GUID, that's GUID, that is a globally unique identifier, like a taxpayer ID or a telephone number, a social security number, a student ID, an employee ID, a customer ID, things that, you know, only one person gets one number. Whenever you can get two of them together, you've created an edge, a network. And whenever we have a collection of edges, we could have structure. And so this is what it would look like if you had Twitter data. It would look similar if it was wikis. All the column names might be different, but it's something and the other thing, and they're connected. And that connection might have happened again and again and again and again at different times, where among different people, where different entities, different pages connect, different Twitter accounts connect, different videos link to other videos. And this often happens at a very precise time and date. And so if we can answer this, we can then push the answers to these questions into different columns. Who did what, with whom, when, and where, and the result will be network. We will get a network. We will be able to take from a message, let's say a message that the NodeXL account writes, and it says, NodeXL is brought to you by the SMR Foundation. That would mean a line. But if another account comes along, it's me, and I retweet that, two lines are created because I'm retweeting one account and I'm mentioning in a retweet another account. Another user comes along, that would be Wasim over at NodeXL Academy, and he mentions separately a tweet. He writes a tweet that mentions me, mentions another person, and mentions his own account. He's actually both of them, but we then have another person, they have a tweet, they have no other person's name in it, they become an isolate. They have no connections to others. Later, another account replies to that person, that creates a new connection. Then there is, of course, the potential that there is a follow graph, a separate kind of connection that undergirds this. That may also be true. And so these connections can be of different strengths and of different flavors. And when we put them all together, different positions in these graphs can have different weights, different importance. So if we just make up a graph, this is an entirely fictional graph, just the alphabet, we can say, if we want to, let's count and color and size each dot by how many lines touch it. So you can see Z and A and O, lots of lines touch them. That's how many connections they have. But here, this is betweenness centrality, a different measure in network theory. It's the how much are you in the bridge position, the person who is in the keystone, the broker, the connector. If we go back, you'll see that O is a very large node. O has 4 connections. That's degree. But O is now small in betweenness, because if O were to be removed, nobody would be disconnected. If F was removed, a lot of people would not be able to reach the others. And so using these insights, again, that different ways of connecting give you different kind of positional power. What we want to make clear is that many other tools just give you a number like 10. How many followers have you got? 10. How many retweets did you get? 10. But 10 does not quite capture the structure, and because over here on the other side of the screen, you'll see there are in fact 10 dots. So 10 is accurate, but insufficient. And so we want to bring into the discussion of social media, not just volume, but structure. And so when we do that, what we find is that there is structure to be found. As you may have found already when you go and browse the NodeXL graph gallery, not all of the networks look the same. Some of them look quite different. You can find a paper now from Pew Research at Pew Research Internet Project called Mapping Twitter Topic Networks from Polarized Crowds to Community Clusters, in which we discover that there are these important shapes in these network structures. The shape like hub. the hub and spoke pattern. And that pattern means something. It means that there's an influencer in the center and that a lot of people are retweeting that person, forming an audience for that person. But that is not a community. This, the hub, is a very common pattern in social media. It's one we see in NodeXL all the time when we look at things like Twitter. But it's important to remember that that doesn't mean that it's social, and it doesn't mean that it's community. This is what audience or broadcast looks like in the internet. There are other roles, let's say like the bridge. There's my bridge. I'm away from my bridge, but I'm visiting one that looks like this. Bridges are the relatively rare people who connect otherwise separate groups. And we also want to find them. Then, of course, there are isolates, the islands, the people who have no connection to anybody else. And it turns out that while on their own, an island wouldn't really matter, a collection of islands, I believe that's called an archipelago, those collections of isolates do matter. They indicate whether or not a topic is a brand, whether or not it has public visibility. You'll notice that if you go and look at the SM society map, there are almost no isolates in that map. We are an in-group topic, whereas something like Coca-Cola or iPhone will have lots of isolates. That's an out-group topic. That's a brand. So the key features of our approach: we want to do network analysis first. We want to take content, use it to find edges, and then use edges to find groups, and then do content analysis again. Content analysis within the group. And then visualize the network and see the shape of these conversation populations over time. And when we do that, what we find is that less than 1% of the population are the influencers, the people at the center of these structures, and that these conversations cluster. They are not one conversation, they are a dozen or more sub-conversations, each with slightly different topics, different hashtags, different URLs, different leaders. And so our goal has been to do these 5 things: to automate the creation, sort of the way that the old Polaroids worked. You point it at something, press the button, you get this. You get an artifact, a network, and the data set that allows you to see this collection of connections. So we do data collection from a variety of data sources, store it, do the network analysis, the text or content analysis, visualize it, write a report. It turns out 5 things are good, 7 things are better. People wanted 2 more things, and we have built additional tools to support these 2 additional tasks. Those tasks are discovery and presentation, otherwise known as exploration and explanation, finding the story in the data and then telling that story to others. And so there it is, new discovery and presentation. So we give you data sets that can tell a story at multiple levels. There's the vertex level. There's an individual user account buried deep into that cluster, but that cluster is a group. And we have data about it as a unique entity, that there's the individual, but then there's the group. The group also has a status as having its own citizenship. It has a population, it has words, it has hashtags. It's a thing too. And then finally, there is the graph as a whole. So there's an individual, there's a group, and a graph. What we are now working on is a dashboard interface. And if you look into the text chat, I think you'll see a link to both. There's the report, the result of those 5 things: data collection, storage, network analysis, content analysis, and reporting. But I also put a link to this other thing, the NodeXL Pro Insights report. And it is built on a new layer of technology. You may have noticed, there it is, NodeXL. There's an X and an L, and that's as close as we can get to the word Excel. And that's because we use Excel. And indeed, let's take you right here. There's NodeXL. There's Excel. It's just Excel. Excel, you may be familiar with. It's pretty comfortable for a lot of people. What we've done is added a menu, a new ribbon here, and it has all the buttons and stuff you need to get data, store data, analyze it, visualize it, write the report, and export those reports. And so you can just grab the graph and you can do everything you can do in Excel. You can sort things, you can go to different worksheets. All of that is very, usually pretty comfortable for people. But it turns out that there are more advanced features of Excel. They're not that comfortable. They're not that easy to use. And one of those features is this thing called VLOOKUP or pivot tables. And it's the idea that sometimes you want to know everything about a person, but that tells you about a hashtag, and then you want to know everything about the hashtag, and that tells you about another word or a day. And it's the idea of pivot and twisting your data on each point in order to figure out, let's say, who are the people in Canada talking about SM society? Well, to do that, we need better tools. If NodeXL is built on Excel, what we need to do is build on the next generation of data analysis tools. And that is a thing from Microsoft Power BI. So if NodeXL builds on Excel, then NodeXL Pro Insights builds on Power BI. We were thinking about calling it Node BI, but that also spells no Debbie. And I have a cousin named Debbie, so we couldn't do that to her. So we're going to call it NodeXL Pro Insights. And basically what you get is this dashboard. You get a series of graphically interactive screens that allow you to click to filter your data down, to discover the nugget of your story, to understand what's happening in this data that matters. Where are the people? When was a peak moment? Who are the influential people? What words are most common? And so in this dashboard, now you have sort of the porthole in the middle, and then around the edges, you have information about the network position of people. So which group are they in and how towards the center are they, the top users by betweenness. Then we have on the other dimension, on the other part of the screen, things about the content. What words are being used? What hashtags are being used? Which tweets are being tweeted a lot? And then in the middle, that's the sort of the porthole. You use the sidebars to configure things, and then you see what's left. If you've clicked on this and that, the other thing, you'll see that maybe there was a change in activity by group, or only certain words were talked about on a certain day. And then we do have metadata about what language is being used, or I find this particularly interesting. What kind of phone was used? Is it Android or iPhone? Did they tweet from the desktop? Trying to make comparisons between Android users and iPhone users, for some reason, I find that very interesting. But also the users who were verified by Twitter versus not verified, or people who also use this other word. Perhaps you want to see people who use a political hashtag. You want to see the people who tweet this word or that word. You could do that by clicking down the sidebar here. So what we learn when we do this kind of analysis is that social media may be called social media, but it's not very social. If social is defined as having density and reciprocity, not just being audiences and not just being about celebrity, if it requires people to say hello back when you say hello to them, then it may very well be the case that social media is not social. And that might also mean that online community was not really all that much community. And now I do want to make this caveat. That doesn't mean none. It means it's rare and therefore precious. It's not that it never happens. I'm sure we've all had the experience of having something that we want to call online community, or an experience that felt social in social media. It's possible. What we are saying is statistically, it's not that common. it doesn't really happen that often. It's actually more like a power law. Most of the time, people don't get much at all. You don't get a reply. I think about 93% of all tweets never get a reply. And so while social media makes one promise, people hear two. They did hear the promise that all may speak. Anybody can tweet. It's true. But it does not promise that all may be heard. And most people are not heard. And we can see that they're not heard because most people are engaged in Twitter and in other kinds of social media in a very kind of peripheral way in which they merely ratify or retweet or amplify the messages of some other more prominent user. And so what I hope we could maybe jump into here is the link. I think, let's see if I can find the SM Society. Just a moment, I'll go and find the insights map. Oh, I guess it's in the chat. That's where it's okay. So I'll go join you for the insights map. There we go. So here we can actually, I hope you'll try this out while we're doing this. This is the NodeXL Pro Insights report for this conference. So this is the map and report for us as of just a little while ago. So this was just before we started our session. And in this page of this report, we're just seeing an overview. This is just a summary page. It's pretty much everything that we've got. Just a quick overview of what there is to see. But these sidebars are focal pages. These allow us to drill down into some dimension of the data. And in this case, it's going to be the location dimension of the data. And what we're going to get to see is where on Earth, at least as people self-declare, and you'll see that we're using this location field, and we're then running it through the Bing Maps filter, and Bing is doing the best it can to figure out where are people. And it's true that not everybody is going to be mapped. If you didn't put your location in there accurately, you're probably not going to be mapped accurately, but we can zoom down and often get to a remarkable level of geographic specificity. And I think I know where Toronto is. And you guys may be there, and we can actually click on these fields and see who are the people in that location, who are the people who are very influential. So we can switch groups. We can see that there are 2 groups in this area, and we can see who else is an influential person in that area. So just by clicking on the location, we might have some theories about how there is geographic variation in our hashtag. You could zoom out and scroll over here and see who are those people who are lucky to be in Hawaii, it looks like right now. And that's this person. So with that, we could then pivot. We could then ask ourselves, who are the influential people discussing this topic? And of course, that requires that we have a theory of influence. And we do. And you may have another one, but we have a theory of influence. And ours is based on network location. And here in this display, we're presenting the population of people who tweeted the word SM Society. And they're being plotted in 2 scattergrams. One is how many people's names did they say as plotted against how many other people said their name. So that's out degree and in degree. Pardon me a moment. And you can see that we have 4 quadrants, and quadrant 2 is up and to the right. And quadrant 2 is a relatively sparsely populated quadrant. And I think I know many of the organizing committee of this conference, and I think that's them. If you're on the call, thank you for your efforts again this year. And I think you'll see over in the other scattergram, it's a slightly different presentation and projection of the population. In this case, it's eigenvector versus betweenness. And it again is very selective in who it puts in quadrant 2. And again, it's the leadership of our discussions. And so this allows us to do things like perhaps ask, it's great to know that these are the influential people, but now we only want to know who's influential who also used Android. And so I'm just going to click the little box there that represents Android, and now all the non-Android users are gone. We might now also want to ask the question, how many of these people also did something else? Perhaps we want to know if they were using a particular URL, the social media and society link, the accepted papers link. So I'm just going to hold the control key down here and click. And these are only the influential, or it should be only the influential people who also clicked that link or tweeted that link. And so it's this idea of peeling the onion, of peeling away content in order to find that set of people and content items that you can read. If I recall, we can read about 10 tweets a minute or 60 tweets an hour, 600 tweets an hour. That's right. It's not a lot of tweets. And we may need to justify why we read the tweets we read. And here we can say, well, we read the tweets in quadrant 2, the up and to the right tweets, the ones that had the most favorites and the most retweets. Or we could say that we read the messages from the most influential people. Or we read the messages from a particular geography. Or I like this one where we get to see the images. I think my browser is having a problem. None of the images are loading, but on your screen, you should be able to see all the images. One of the pages that we recently added to the report that we think is particularly useful for scholars would be the compare to page. The art scholars among you may know what a diptych is, or a triptych is 3, a diptych is 2. It's basically 2 pages facing each other. They're mirror images of each other. And on this side, we invite you to say, well, how does group 1 compare to group 2? And we'll just click group 1, group 2, and in a few seconds, we should see the words, the domains, the hashtags, the top users, the client, the language, everything should change. And you should get a displayable, a presentable image that perhaps is tweetable, but maybe it's also something that can be put into a paper. Maybe it's actually something that is an analytic artifact. So the goal for us is to support the discovery of the empirically supportable tale, the story that tells us something important about a collection of content that's larger than the collection of content a human being can actually consume. And so here we're looking at a relatively modest collection of content, but we all know that this could get big fast. And I could show us perhaps a different example. There's the Sunbelt Conference, and then I think I can find us some examples where the conference size or the topic size grows so large so quickly that it just becomes really impractical. Here we've got 4,800 tweets from a conference talking about NFTs in New York, non-fungible tokens. And again, now we're dealing with volumes of content that are just so large that it's impractical for a human being to even attempt to consume it all. By the time you got through it all, there'd be too much more new stuff. It would just no longer be timely. And so we are interested in supporting the kinds of scholarship that is empirical, because we think, well, let's see, from current slide, yes. It is argued that social media is a kind of marketplace for ideas. But it's our observation that if they are marketplaces for ideas, they are markets that are overrun by fraud. And so elsewhere in the conference, we're going to hear a great deal about the concept of disinformation and misinformation. I personally am much more concerned about disinformation. I understand it to mean that misinformation is when you're wrong and you don't know it. And disinformation is when you're wrong and you do know it. I have a feeling that disinformation is the more dangerous of the two conditions. And we're interested in asking the question, in what way could scholarship act as a counterbalancing force for disinformation? And it seems that there are other marketplaces, maybe not for ideas, but like marketplaces for money, that are also subject to a great deal of fraud. And in those marketplaces, systems and professionals are in place that hold the fraud, if not remove it, they hold it at bay. And so I'm thinking about financial accounting and financial fraud accounting, and trying to imagine how there could be an analog for social media to have the equivalent of accountants of the marketplaces of ideas. So there's the father of accounting in Western Europe, Luca Pacioli. He's going to be our patron saint, and say, what would social media accounting look like? So I think there may be some questions. I'm going to just check into the chat. And right, yes, it is true that people are going to self-provide location data, and that may mean that we're going to get things like metaverse, but we are getting a sense of many of those locations are geographically valid locations, and in many cases, even if it is metaverse, we're at least seeing it over in the chart. That is what people are saying is their location. So let me see if I can review the chat and see if there are any questions. Wasim, do you see anything that I should address here? And I certainly encourage our participants to do the hand wave thing and ask any questions, queries, comments that they would like to raise at this point. I think we're at the right moment in time. Is that correct?
Yep. So that's perfect timing. So we've got chance for questions as well. I noticed someone in the chat requested for the links to be resent. So I'll do that now. I'll resend everything that we've been posting. And yeah, so if anyone's got any queries on NodeXL or about kind of using this particular tool or method for research, we're happy to answer them.
That's right. Yeah, so if you'll, there, of the links that you may find useful, you'll see the Google form. If you provide an email address, we'll send you a trial license for NodeXL. To use Insights, it will also give you a trial license for Insights, but you will need to have a Power BI account, and you may already have that through your university. I think I saw a question a second ago. I thought I saw a hand up. Who would like to ask a question?
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi,
okay.
Hello.
Yeah, so I was wondering, watching information flow over time. So I saw the networks flow. Would you do that cross-sectionally? So let's say something on MSNBC or Fox gets pushed out and it's going to its pond or whatever you want to call it. How would you track that longitudinally over time using your tool? Thank you.
Great question. What I would do is start with the URL of the story over at Fox or at MSNBC. It could be the same story, but represented on two different platforms. You take those URLs and you use those as query terms. So we're going to search Twitter for the tweets that contain the URL. Twitter, by the way, will do us all a very nice service, because as you know, a lot of people will change the URL by running it through bit.ly or another link shortener. Twitter always unlinks them because it's very concerned about malware, and it will test these links for malware before it will allow it through. And as a result, when you search for the naked or the raw link, you will actually match, even though it doesn't appear to, it will match against the shortened link, which is a nice thing. So by taking URL1 or URL2, you will be seeing the rise and fall of the tweets that contain those two articles. And you would then be able to use our filtering features to see those either together or separate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very good. And I just thought of another question. So YouTube, how does this work in YouTube? It's a lot harder in YouTube, right?
Well, yes. Yes, it works in YouTube. Yes, there are different constraints and challenges. What are the main constraints that are different? YouTube requires you to use a series of keys to access your data. So you have to go to their website, you have to get these keys, and you have to use a lot of them. Each key kind of you use it up very quickly. It's about 10,000 queries per key. They will let you have 20 keys in use, and you can rotate through them. But why is it a hassle? Now you're manually rotating through these 20 keys. So that's one challenge with YouTube. Second challenge with YouTube, it's a more complex environment, and our importer reflects that. Why is it more complex? Well, there are now users, and they post videos, but they also post comments. And videos can be in categories, and comments can reply to each other. And so it is now a multimodal, multiplex environment, where Twitter is actually a unimodal multiplex environment. One class of item, user, many ways they can connect to each other, multiplex, whereas in YouTube, you're getting multimodal multiplex. So it is a more complex environment. I believe Wasim may be able to find us some YouTube examples in the NodeXL Graph Gallery. And I'll note that in the NodeXL Graph Gallery, up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll find a search box. If you type in YouTube, you're going to find a lot of YouTube maps that way. An additional tip would be type your topic of interest into the NodeXL Graph Gallery. There's a very good chance that somebody has made a map about your topic, maybe from Twitter, maybe from YouTube, maybe from Wikipedia or another data source. Something useful may already be there. That's another suggestion. What kinds of networks can you make out of YouTube? Well, it's video networks, it's comment to commenter networks. It's who basically there isn't a reply in YouTube comments, but there is. My message is after yours, so we'll call that a reply. So some of the art of this is how do we craft edges from the data that we can get out of these platforms. I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. Thank you.
Does NodeXL examine network properties such as reciprocity? Yes. Centrality? Yes. Density? Yes. Modularity? Yes. If so, how do you see those properties change over time within a given discussion? Well, depending, you may have to take the same data set and do it over multiple time slices, because reciprocity is based on some bundle of time or a set of events. So for the most part, we're giving you that metric at a snapshot, some unit of data. So in NodeXL, you would probably do that for different time slices and get different modularities, centrality scores, density scores for your network. I think that may have addressed Dane's question. I'll ask Dane if that addressed the question sufficiently. Okay.
And Mark, there was another question. You might have already answered this. Someone asked, is there a way it can be used for back and forth exchanges to track discussions in sequence?
Yes, absolutely. All I would ask for the user to create the data that would provide that is column 1, the sender, column 2, the receiver, column 3, the time, column 4, the date. can that user give us those 4 columns? Then NodeXL will give you a network and network analysis of those replies. Because after all, if B replies to A, it is possible that A would then reply to B. I believe in that kind of a data set. Happy to discuss it. And so one more big follow-up. Wasim's put the forms.google link in there. Anybody who gives us an email address is going to get a trial license. Then if you provide us with your Power BI account, we'll also give a trial license for Insights. So that's one point. Second point, we're very friendly and we like to meet users. So if you have data and you're not sure how to get it into NodeXL, let me give you the email address. info@smrfoundation.org. We are happy to get on a Skype call or a Zoom call or whatever you like. And you can send us a sample data set. We can help you wrangle it into the right format, import it into NodeXL, and get you started, often in under an hour. And so if you do have data already, perhaps you can share it with us. If you do not have data and you have a query term, a hashtag that you're interested in, you can type it in here, or you can email it to us. We'll make these kinds of maps and artifacts, put them into the NodeXL graph gallery, send you a link to an Insights report, and then happily discuss it with you, because that's really where the rubber meets the road for us. We want these artifacts to become a primary ingredient of publications. And I do think maybe I can ask Wasim to add this link again to scholar.google. If you go to scholar.google, and I suspect a lot of us do, and you type in NodeXL, you'll find that there are quite a number of publications coming out making use of NodeXL. And one more pro tip, type in the word NodeXL and then the topic that you're trying to write a paper about. Ecosystem services, superconducting, immigration, COVID, whatever it is. You may find that there are people who are already not only publishing their data sets in the NodeXL Graph Gallery, but it is also possible that they are publishing peer-reviewed publications that use NodeXL, and that could be part of your related works. It could be part of how you frame up your methods. So there you go, scholar.google, NodeXL. Could we see if there are other questions, queries, comments, concerns?
There was another question just now, Mark. I'm not sure if we addressed it. Have you seen it?
The TikTok question. Next question. No, the TikTok is on the list. So we have not got 100%. We don't have an importer for every data source out there. Facebook, we used to, and they broke it. Mr. Zuckerberg made life very difficult for us, and eventually we had to give up. That includes Instagram, very difficult, we had to give up. Also LinkedIn, very difficult, we had to give up. Other things that we might do soon that we haven't given up on: Spotify, Discord, Telegram, Signal, Reddit. What else were we thinking about? I think those are the big ones. So Reddit has push shift. There are other ways, and TikTok. So we would like to get TikTok data. It's not entirely clear that there is actually network edge material in the data you can get out of TikTok. We're starting to look at it. It remains to be seen. Meta point, if you have an edge list, if you have CSV, if you have from other sources that, the who did what with whom, where and when data structure in columns, NodeXL will happily take that data. So if you got TikTok data from some other method, but now need to network analyze it, we welcome your data. CSV works. So I hope that answers that question. Okay. And we share the desire to, or the interest that TikTok is of interest. The question is it possible? Is the API open enough? Does it support providing edge data? I'll give you an example of how an API can exist but not support edge data. You can get comments from Facebook, but every author is identified as a number, and the number changes for every message. And so if Bob wrote message A and message B, you don't see Bob and Bob, you see number 1 and number 2, you don't know who's who. So it is intentionally designed to break the capacity for network analysis, and one wonders why. But Mr. Zuckerberg and I are not on a talking basis, so I'm not going to be able to convince him. So we're going to focus our attention to places you can get network data that are also of interest and importance from a scholarly perspective. Hope that answers that question. Other questions or concerns, Wasim? Maybe our organizer hosts have some points they'd like to make before the session concludes. I know I'd like to say thank you to SM Society for having us back this year. We appreciate the opportunity to share the work we're doing, and we do think that the scholarship in this area is really critical, because we're kind of like, my metaphor is that we are cultural accountants, and we're now engaged in a process of holding back cultural fraud, and by that I mean disinformation. You know, things like masks don't work, COVID isn't real, you know, those kinds of things are very, very risky, and some kind of response, I think a data-driven response may be called for. So if we're going to have a marketplace of ideas, we may need an accounting software package for the marketplace of ideas. And that's what we'd like to be. I see that our organizers think that it's good to go, and we're going to wrap up. We are available here if you have any Q&A. I'm available on Skype. I'm going to type in my Skype name here, and we are also available on at info@SMR Foundation. Let me also say thank you to Wasim for helping make this a successful hour, I think. Thank you, Wasim.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone. And keep an eye out on the social media hashtag as well for the conference. I think Mark's got some analytics planned as well. He'll be tweeting them out.
That's right. I'll map it more. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to the organizers, and hope to see you in person perhaps next July in Toronto. That would be cool. All right. Well, thanks. I'm going to log off.
Thanks, Mark. See you.
Bye-bye.